10-4, one victim being pulled from the fire now, unresponsive.
Being pulled from the fire now, unresponsive.
November 18th, 2020. Firefighters in New London, Connecticut. Force opened the door of a storage shed attached to a house on Pequot Avenue. Inside, unconscious on the floor, is Tony Hsieh. There's a propane heater still running. Candles, nitrous oxide cartridges scattered across the concrete like shell casings, smoke pooling against the ceiling. He is worth $840 million, and he is unresponsive. He had spent 20 years building one of the most beloved companies in America on one single idea: delivering happiness. He wrote the book on it, which sold over 1 million copies. He was the authority on being happy. So why did he die depressed? Paying six-figure salaries for fake friends. Just 9 months earlier, Tony Hsieh was the CEO of Zappos, and this is his story. Tony Hsieh is a Harvard computer science graduate who lives in a 240 square foot Airstream trailer by choice, so neighbors are always 10 feet away. He's a quasi-billionaire who drinks Fernet Branca by the case. He sold his first startup at 24 for $265 million. He sold Zappos to Amazon for $1.2 billion. He wrote a #1 New York Times bestseller called Delivering Happiness. And he had almost never read a negative review about himself. His assistant filtered them out, systematically. In 2009, Tony wrote Delivering Happiness in 2.5 weeks with almost no sleep, surviving on alcohol, caffeine, and eventually coffee beans soaked in vodka. By 2010, he was selling to America his formula for happiness. But privately, Tony had been struggling with multiple mental health conditions over the years and likely undiagnosed autism. He also had prosopagnosia, face blindness, a condition where the brain struggles to recognize faces, even familiar ones. At times, when someone walked into a room, he would quickly offer them food or a drink, an excuse to step away, listen to them talk to someone else, and identify them solely by the sound of their voice. Tony found solitude repulsive and actively fled it, and yet he was a deeply introverted person who found being the center of attention uncomfortable. His parents, Richard and Judy Hsieh, were Taiwanese immigrants who had very high expectations for their sons, which probably caused high pressure to perform. During childhood, they were so strict, they forced Tony to skip his 8th grade dance so he could take the SAT a day early. The resentment from missing that dance stayed with him for decades. May 2012. Tony Hsieh makes an announcement. He is committing $350 million of his own money to transform downtown Las Vegas across real estate, startups, small businesses, and culture.
We thought instead of building a dream campus like Nike, Google, or Apple have, let's actually focus on the community and the ecosystem. And so it kind of transformed from a campus relocation project to a project to help revitalize downtown Vegas.
He calls it the Downtown Project, destined to be the most community-focused, large city in the world. He had already committed to moving Zappos' headquarters downtown. Now he would do something bigger. He built a 3-story shipping container park with shops, startups, and amusements surrounding a lively courtyard. No outside investors controlling the vision, and very few people able to challenge Tony's decisions. Tony doesn't talk about returns on investment. He talks about collisionable hours.
Collisionable meaning like in a semi-public place like a restaurant or bar or cafe or walking down the street, 3 or 4 hours a day, times 7 days a week. I travel a lot, so let's call it 40 weeks a year. If you do the math, it works out to roughly 1,000 collisionable hours a year for me.
He believes those moments can be engineered, and he absolutely needs them, as he genuinely fears loneliness and finds it unbearable. In spirit, he is treating the city like a startup experiment with downtown residents as the test subjects. In its early days, the Downtown Project looked genuinely exciting from the outside. Restaurants opened, Artists moved in, and the press ate it up. Bloomberg even ran a headline that read, "Tony Hsieh is building a startup paradise in Vegas."
And so the overall investment is $350 million, and the way it's broken down is $50 million will go into the small businesses that help build community neighborhood, $50 million to tech startup companies in the tech scene.
For a while, the story held. Tony kept moving, kept building, kept the music loud. But then, the deaths started. 3 suicides rocked the downtown project community over 18 months. In January 2013, Jody Sherman, founder of Ecomom, who had relocated his own family along with his company to Las Vegas as part of the downtown project, shot himself. A year later, in January 2014, Ovik Banerjee also took his own life. He was 24 years old, a key downtown project employee who had moved to Las Vegas because of Tony's vision. Then in May 2014, Matt Berman, a tenant entrepreneur connected to the project, was found hanged at his home. 3 deaths, all connected to the community Tony built around his $350 million experiment. Tony publicly frames the business failures in startup language, pivots, experiments, learning, and so forth. He is notably quiet about the deaths publicly. But even as the downtown project burns through money and is shadowed by these tragedies, Tony is pushing a parallel experiment inside Zappos he had started in 2013. A new way of working called holacracy.
CEO Tony Hsieh has announced his company will be moving toward a self-organization, self-management model. This means there will effectively be no more people managers. It's a bold move for the company that's prepared to deal with a certain amount of backlash. Hsieh is reportedly offering 3 months of severance and 3 months of benefits to employees who aren't willing to participate in this extreme new business model.
So it's interesting because the headlines have talked about no hierarchy, and that's actually not true. There still is a hierarchy. The difference is, in a typical organization, it's a hierarchy of people, and under holacracy, it's a hierarchy of purpose.
By May 2015, 210 people, around 14% of the staff, took the buyout rather than work this way. Tony doesn't mourn. By 2014, he had moved into an Airstream trailer on a downtown lot he controlled, and a small community had grown up around him. A cluster of Airstreams on adjacent lots in the middle of downtown Las Vegas. There's an unusually open communal atmosphere.
What was kind of the vision here?
Originally, I guess the thought was, let's try to co-create a urban version of Burning Man. It's all friends and friends of friends, and that's definitely part of what I liked about the Burning Man environment. And so it's just fun being able to try to recreate that in an urban environment.
In Las Vegas, he had scaled it further. He bought a 248-unit luxury high-rise downtown and began filling it with downtown project employees. The building became a vertical extension of the trailer park. But after a wave of failed startups and press calling the whole thing a vanity project, Tony had to downsize the idea and reduce his world to a cluster of Airstreams in downtown Las Vegas. Over the next 4 years, the downtown project's ambitions shrank even further. Tony's world too. National media attention fades, and the downtown project slowly slips out of the spotlight. But Tony is still Tony. The trailer park, the people always within earshot, the parties, the escalating alcohol abuse.
When I work with Tony Hsieh, I think I probably learned more about the fact that you can be an introvert and create an amazingly engaging, playful culture. Like, that to me was surprising, because I almost always thought that great leaders were charismatic and extroverts and highly verbal, and not Tony. Tony was shy.
He ran all-hands meetings for 1,500 people. He gave keynotes. He hosted parties. He was the face of a happiness brand. He was a shy extrovert, a walking contradiction. This extended to his romantic life. Tony openly championed polyamory, frequently bringing 3 or 4 dates to the same corporate events, introducing them to each other. In a way, he was spreading his emotional investment across a wide portfolio, preventing any one person from getting too close. Battling frequent bouts of depression, he was already under heavy medication. Adderall for ADHD, Xanax for anxiety, Ambien for insomnia, and alcohol as a social lubricant. He told his girlfriend, "I have to drink. It's the only way I can live in the now. It's the only way I can get out of my head." Tony didn't drink because he was a party guy. He drank because without it, the parties would be terrifying. By 2019, the experiment has become a lifestyle. Tony has everything he needs within walking distance. Then, in March 2020, pandemic shutdowns begin closing offices, bars, and public spaces across the country. The world locks its doors.
More breaking news this afternoon. To better fight the coronavirus pandemic, Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak has ordered all non-essential businesses to shut down or face penalties. That order goes into effect at midnight tonight.
August 24th, 2020. Tony Hsieh retires as CEO of Zappos. After 2 decades, he walks away from the company that made his name. The departure is framed as voluntary, but behind the scenes, Amazon executives who had become aware of Tony's erratic behavior and drug use gave him an ultimatum: recommit to the company or step down. By then, Tony's thinking had visibly crossed a line. During his final months at Zappos, Amazon executives asked him about his latest business innovations. Tony confidently told them he had solved the traveling salesman problem, one of the most famous unsolved problems in computer science. When Amazon's top engineers pressed him for the formula, Tony told them they wouldn't understand it because he had solved it in a different made-up language. By that month, 5 months into the pandemic, Tony had already left Las Vegas for Park City, Utah. COVID-19 had hollowed out downtown Las Vegas. Many bars were shuttered or restricted. Container Park was a shadow of itself. Tony's collisionable hours, the spontaneous encounters he'd designed his whole city around, had all but vanished. Summer 2020, Park City, Utah. Tony buys a mansion, then a second, then a third. Soon he owns nearly a dozen. He starts calling people, former Zappos employees, musicians, even loose acquaintances. The pitch is simple. Name your price. Whatever you're making now, he'd beat it, sometimes doubling it, sometimes more.
You know, when he moved, he made outreaches to certain friends and said, you know, I'll pay you double your highest W-2 if you just would move with me and just have fun. He supposedly did not use phones or computers. You couldn't really email him. If you wanted to get in touch with Tony, it was either through snail mail or you got in touch with another person who was around him who did have a phone.
The offers are absurd, and they are made on the spot. Salaries were only part of the equation. Tony established a rule. Anyone who sourced a deal would receive a flat 10% commission. If a friend convinced him to buy a $15 million mansion, that friend pocketed $1.5 million. The more extravagant the purchase, the bigger the cut. His longtime personal assistant, Mimi Pham, seized the opportunity. She raised her own salary from around $9,000 to $30,000 a month. She then introduced, and Tony agreed to, a $30,000 per day Susie penalty that was charged whenever rival associate Susie Balson stayed at one of his properties. Tony was invoiced $1.83 million in fees through this scheme and ended up paying $420,000. Inside the mansions, reality was bending. Tony hired local court reporters to sit in the corners of rooms and type transcripts of his everyday conversations.
Hsieh's longtime friend, Tyler Williams, says the tech mogul offered him $1 million to wake him up in the morning.
Tony used to always say, if you had a magic wand and anything were possible and regulations or resources weren't a problem, what would you do? And so yes, we thought about big ideas. Then those ideas would go into a processing system around him that people who were rational and could tell him that we looked into this doesn't make sense, here's why, none of those people were left.
By October, his ketamine use became regular, with high doses causing hallucinations. Tony's use of ketamine began in late 2019, after he tried it with his friend Tyler Williams at Burning Man. His plan was to cut back on drinking and ingest psychedelic mushrooms and ketamine instead. He thought this would be an upgrade from alcohol to help him deal with his issues. Tony, who until that point wasn't yet an habitual drug user, started to suffer from paranoia, delusional thinking, and delusions of grandeur, resulting in erratic, nonsensical, and destructive behavior. Eventually, his addiction to ketamine made him incapable of sobering up and recognizing the detrimental effects the drug was having on him. He began to believe he was living in a simulation, that he could manifest water, levitate, transform into animals, download talents Matrix style, and learn special skills while high. One day, through a locked bathroom door on a tour bus, he told a close friend, "I'm going to solve Corona. I'm going to solve COVID right now. I almost have it figured out. I just need more mushrooms." His friend staged an intervention in February 2020 after he acted bizarrely while officiating a wedding. During another intervention attempt, Tony tried to buy his friend Tyler Williams' silence. He told him, "If you don't question me again, I'll give you half my net worth." He went to rehab for about 2 weeks, but left early and resumed use. By the time he reached Park City, the ketamine had already damaged his ability to reason clearly. Then heavy nitrous oxide, also known as laughing gas, enters the mix as another attempt to deal with his social anxiety disorder. Nitrous oxide produces dissociation, a severance from your own thoughts, your own pain, your own awareness of the room you're in. It was gaining mainstream traction in biohacking circles, framed as a micro-dosing compound. Tony was using up to 50 cartridges a day. His home was littered with hundreds of canisters. At that dosage, it doesn't expand consciousness, it obliterates it. It also causes hypoxia, depleting the oxygen the brain needs to function. Tony was literally starving his own mind. He also starts going long periods without eating, framing it as an experiment in how long the body could function without eating. Friends notice the weight dropping off him. But fasting is only part of it. Tony takes ice baths 4 times a week, eventually transitioning to leaving his shower running ice cold all night. He believes that every cold shower permanently eliminates his body's need for an hour of sleep. At one point, he stepped on a piece of shattered glass and then intentionally walked through his Park City mansion, leaving a trail of bloody footprints across the floor so that his friends could easily track his movements. Then, he starts getting obsessed with fire. He accumulates a massive collection of more than 1,000 candles.
They got this far because instead of his community rallying to try to work together in love to save a friend, the community fractured into different groups of people that had different interests in mind. The group of people that were around him when he was like this didn't have his best interests at heart.
But now, someone is getting ready to give him some tough love and try to burst his toxic bubble. August 2020. The singer Jewel flies to Park City. Jewel and Tony were friends who had collaborated on projects. She has heard from people in his circle that he is in serious trouble. What she finds is devastating. Inside the $15 million Park City ranch, sinks and showers are running at full blast to mimic the sounds of the Amazon jungle. The floors are covered in broken glass, melted wax, and dog feces. She walks out to the backyard and finds Tony sitting in his boxers in the dirt. He is emaciated. He holds up a small box covered in erratic scribbles and tells her he no longer needs to sleep because he has cracked the algorithm for world peace. Within a day, Jewel abruptly leaves. Shortly after, she sends a letter to Tony via FedEx since he had ditched email and texts as part of a digital cleanse. She writes, "I am going to be blunt. I need to tell you that I don't think you are well and in your right mind. I think you are taking too many drugs that cause you to disassociate. The people you are surrounding yourself with are either ignorant or willing to be complicit in you killing yourself. When you look around and realize that every single person around you is on your payroll, then you are in trouble. You are in trouble, Tony." The letter arrived at the house. The entourage intercepted it. They covered Jewel's words in sticky notes with mocking annotations and displayed it inside the mansion for everyone to laugh at. His family too tries to help him. Over the preceding weeks and months, Richard and Judy Hsieh have flown to Utah. His brothers have come, but Tony is cutting them off. He asks friends to make sure he is never left alone with them. The moments he does grant them are laced with draconian conditions. With his mother, he strikes a deal. He will be open with her only if she agrees to be his friend. The moment she acts like family, he tells her, he will start hiding things. When Judy urges him to see a therapist, he agrees, on one condition. For every minute he spends in therapy, she must sit in an ice bath. When she presses the point again, bringing up his struggles with attention, Tony storms out of the house. By this point, Tony had formalized his system of control. Near his bed, he arranged a wall of post-it notes with the names of his friends and family, each one positioned on a scoring scale from +3 to -3 based on their compliance. Anyone who suggested he needed rehab was immediately docked points. Fall below 0 and you were cut off entirely. His brother Andy hesitated to leave. Something about the faces around Tony didn't feel right. 10 days later, he came back. In November 2020, Tony leaves Park City and travels to New London, Connecticut to stay with his girlfriend, Rachel Brown, a former Zappos executive. He is accompanied by a small group that includes his brother Andy, several friends and employees, and a traveling nurse. His family knows he has gone to Connecticut, but they are losing the ability to reach him. His parents' calls and texts go unanswered, though Andy remains part of the entourage. Just before leaving for Connecticut, Tony makes a FaceTime call to an old friend. He leans close to the camera and whispers, "Don't trust anyone here. Don't trust anyone." Then the call ends. November 18th, 2020, New London, Connecticut. It's around 3:30 a.m. Tony is staying in a small storage shed attached to the back of the house. He's surrounded by candles, bottles of liquor, a marijuana pipe, nitrous oxide cartridges, a whipped cream dispenser, and a propane heater. In recent weeks, Tony had become fixated on a new experiment, testing how little oxygen his body needed to survive. He was deliberately sealing spaces and depleting ventilation, convinced he could train his biology to function on less. The propane heater glowing in the corner of the shed was part of this. At 3:15 a.m., security footage captures Tony pushing open the shed door and dragging the glowing propane heater outside into the cold. Then he pulls it back in. He shuts the door behind him. The sound of a deadbolt clicking is audible on camera. 5 minutes later, his brother Andy and others come to check on him for a planned airport trip to Hawaii. Through the locked door, Tony calls back, "5 more minutes!" Smoke alarms sound shortly after. Andy beats against the wooden door. Inside the house, Elizabeth Pezzello, one of his assistants, holds a phone to her ear, telling the 911 dispatcher a man is trapped. A loud hissing noise pierces the air, a propane valve releasing pressure. Smoke billows through the cracks in the doorframe. Someone grabs a brick and smashes through an interior window into the shed, desperately trying to reach Tony as flames shoot through the opening. By the time firefighters force the door open at around 3:38 a.m., Tony is on the floor, unresponsive, a short distance from the door. This, investigators would later note, was not Tony's first fire incident in recent weeks. The medical examiner would cite smoke inhalation as the cause, with ethanol intoxication, which would impair reaction to fire, a significant contributing factor. Tony is transported to Lawrence Memorial Hospital before being airlifted by helicopter to the Connecticut Burn Center, where he is placed on life support. His parents are notified. Richard and Judy Hsieh rush to Connecticut to join his brother Andy, who was already at the house. For the first time in weeks, possibly months, his parents are in the same room with their son. Richard and Judy Hsieh sit in a hospital room at the burn center in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Their son is on a ventilator. He has not been conscious since firefighters pulled him from the shed. The room is quiet, the hallway is not. Over 9 days, people arrive. Former Zappos employees, Park City associates, friends, and others from his orbit begin to arrive. Many of the people coming through the room are strangers to his parents. November 27, 2020, the day after Thanksgiving, Tony Hsieh is pronounced dead. He is 46 years old. The medical examiner rules the death accidental. Cause of death: complications from smoke inhalation with acute ethanol intoxication as a significant contributing condition. The fire marshal leaves the cause of the fire undetermined. There is no will. His existing trusts and business entities are incomplete, outdated, and nowhere close to covering a fortune worth hundreds of millions. There are no clear instructions for what happens next. Instead of contracts, Tony had taken to writing deals on whatever was nearby. Sticky notes, napkins, scraps of paper. In the weeks and months that follow, the sticky notes and hastily signed agreements surface. His personal assistant, the one who had raised her own salary to $30,000 a month, sues his grieving family for $130 million, claiming anticipated profits from contracts scrawled on sticky notes and napkins. Many years have passed since Tony's death, and delivering happiness is still being sold. His ideas still appear in case studies at some business schools and leadership programs, but they did not work for him because he had stopped letting people tell him the truth. Tony Hsieh paid new Zappos hires up to $4,000 to quit, to test whether they genuinely wanted to be there. By the end of his life, he was paying people whatever it took to stay. The door of the shed in New London was barricaded from the inside when firefighters arrived. The fire investigation is closed, but for many who knew him, the questions about how he got to that point haven't stopped. The night before the fire, Tony was making plans to check into a rehabilitation clinic in Hawaii. Just before entering the shed, he asked the people in the house to check on him every 5 minutes. Someone who is planning to get help tomorrow is someone who knows on some level that they need it. That part of him was still there, still trying to find the door.